They say the scariest monsters don't live in haunted houses. They live next door. It's strange, isn't it? How easy it is to trust the people you see every day. The ones who smile when you take out the trash, who wave when you pull into the driveway, who seem to know just a little too much about your life. But every neighborhood hides its secrets, and some neighbors never stop watching. Tonight, you'll hear 7 true stories about the people living just a few feet away. Stories of quiet streets, flickering lights, locked doors, and the things that happen when you start to notice. So, turn down your lights, make sure your doors are locked, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Because after this video, you might start watching your own windows a little differently. I moved into my new apartment in late November. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small 1-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of an older building near downtown Spokane. After my breakup, I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere I could reset my life and not run into anyone I knew. The place had that kind of stillness that feels good at first, the kind that makes you feel like the world finally stopped spinning. But after a few nights, that stillness started to feel heavy, like the silence itself was listening. My living room faced the narrow alley between my building and the one across from it. Only about 30 feet separated the two, so from my window I could clearly see the row of identical apartments opposite mine. Most nights the whole alley would be dark, except for one window. Every night, without fail, a pale blue light glowed from that apartment across the alley. It wasn't the warm yellow of a lamp or TV. It was colder, almost the color of a computer monitor left on sleep mode. At first, I figured someone worked late or just forgot to turn it off. Maybe a college kid gaming until dawn. Still, the light was strange. It didn't flicker, didn't change brightness, didn't move, just stayed there, steady, casting that eerie glow through my blinds. A week went by, and I started noticing how it reflected faintly on my ceiling at night. A soft pulse of blue that kept me awake long after midnight. One night I gave up trying to sleep and walked over to the window, pulled the blinds aside just enough to peek out. The alley was empty. The air outside was still, and across the way, behind that glass, I finally saw it. A silhouette. Someone was standing there, perfectly still, facing my window. I couldn't make out details, just the outline of a person. They weren't moving. They weren't doing anything, just watching. I froze for what felt like a full minute. Then I laughed it off, told myself it had to be a trick of the light. Maybe a coat rack, maybe a reflection. But even as I backed away from the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow had shifted, just slightly, as if following me. That night, I kept the blinds closed, but the blue glow still bled through the edges of the fabric. It stayed there until sunrise. For a few nights after that, I tried not to look. I told myself that whatever I saw wasn't real, that it was just the reflection of a streetlight or my own shadow bouncing off the glass. But curiosity is a strange thing. The more you try to ignore something, the louder it gets inside your head. So one night, around 1 a.m., I found myself standing at the window again. The blue light was there, still as ever, and so was the silhouette, exactly in the same spot. Same shape, same posture, like it hadn't moved an inch since the first time I saw it. It was standing right by the window, head tilted slightly, almost touching the glass. I could make out the faint curve of a shoulder, the straight line of an arm. It wasn't moving, not even breathing, as far as I could tell. A cold shiver crawled up my neck. Something about the stillness felt wrong. Even mannequins have a softness to them, something that tells your brain they're harmless. This didn't. This felt aware. I decided to test something. I reached for the lamp beside my couch and switched it on. The room flooded with warm light. For a second, I couldn't see outside. The reflection of my own face filled the window. When my eyes adjusted, the blue glow across the alley had vanished. Just gone. No silhouette, no light, only darkness. My heart pounded as I turned the lamp back off, and right away, the blue glow flickered back to life. Not instantly. It came back in 3 short flashes. 1, 2, 3. Like some kind of signal. I froze. I didn't move for a long time. It felt like the air in the room had thickened, like every sound had stopped existing. I remember whispering to myself, "It's just coincidence. Maybe power surge." But deep down I didn't believe it, because that same pattern, 3 slow flashes, repeated again the next night. And the night after. By the 3rd night, I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed my couch across the room, away from the window, taped a towel over the blinds to block the light. But even through the fabric, that faint blue still leaked in. It touched the edges of everything I owned. My walls, my hands, my eyes. And I started to dream about it. Dreams where I was standing in that other apartment, looking back at myself. But from the wrong side of the glass. I started noticing small things after that, things I couldn't explain. One morning when I opened my blinds, I saw it, a handprint, right there on the outside of my window. It wasn't dusty or greasy like a normal smudge. It looked almost clean, like someone had pressed their palm against the glass after washing their hands. 5 perfect fingers, clear as day. And the strangest part, my apartment was on the 3rd floor. I leaned out the window, craning my neck to look down. There was no fire escape, no ledge, nothing anyone could stand on. The alley below was empty. The only sound was the hum of the traffic 2 blocks away. I cleaned the glass that afternoon, thinking maybe it was just an old mark I hadn't noticed before. But the next morning, it was back. Same spot, same size, same hand. After that, I started keeping the blinds shut almost all the time. But sometimes, I'd catch that faint blue light glowing through the fabric. And when I got close, I could swear I heard something soft, like a tiny click. The sound of a camera shutter. Once, I opened the blinds just fast enough to catch it. Across the alley, the blue light flickered, and I thought I saw movement. Something shifting in front of the window. Then everything went dark. My heart was pounding so hard I felt sick. I stood there in the dark for minutes, staring at the spot where that light had been, trying to convince myself I hadn't really heard the sound. That night, I decided to record it. I set my phone on a small tripod, facing the window, hit record, and went to bed. When I woke up, the recording was still running, almost 7 hours long. I scrolled through the footage half asleep, expecting to see nothing. But around the 3-hour mark, the light appeared, faint blue, same as always. And then, the screen flickered. The entire image pulsed white for a second, and when it came back, the window on my screen was black. No reflection, no light, no silhouette. Just the sound of my own breathing in the background. I thought maybe the exposure had blown out, but when I checked the file details, the timestamp jumped. 3 minutes, missing, completely gone. I sat there staring at the phone, hands shaking. It felt like something was wrong with the air again. Too still, too quiet. I turned toward the window and that's when I saw it. The towel I had taped over the blinds was gone. It was folded neatly on the floor beneath the window, and the blinds were open. The blue light was shining directly in. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I just sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the window. The towel was still there on the floor, folded like someone had done it carefully. And outside, the blue light was gone again. I didn't know who else to call, so I phoned my landlord. His name's Doug, older guy, always half distracted, like he's juggling 10 properties at once. When I told him about the light and the person across the alley, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Across the alley? Which unit?" I told him the number. He hesitated, and then said, "That apartment's been empty since last year." I laughed. It came out nervous, too loud. "No, I mean right across from me. The one with the blue light. Someone's in there every night." Doug cleared his throat. "Yeah, that's the one. 3rd floor, right? Unit 3B? I said yes, and he sighed. "Look, I don't want to freak you out, but no one's lived there since March of last year. There was a small fire. Mostly smoke damage. I never got around to renovating it. He said the place didn't even have working electricity. The power was cut off after the incident. No one should be in there. When I hung up, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I looked out the window again. Midday sun. No blue light. Just the dirty glass of the opposite building. I tried to tell myself the landlord was mistaken, that maybe someone had illegally moved in, or that another tenant was using the wiring somehow. But I couldn't ignore what he said. No electricity. No power. That night, I set up my phone again, determined to record everything properly this time. I taped the blinds open, pointed the camera directly across the alley, and hit record. Then, I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark. At first, nothing happened. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. Then, around 1:20 a.m., it appeared. That same pale blue glow filling the window across from mine. But this time, there was no silhouette. Only the light itself, shining too steadily, too bright to be natural. I stared through the camera screen. The light didn't flicker, didn't move. But after a few seconds, I realized the brightness on the video wasn't matching what I saw with my eyes. On the screen, the light began to pulse, slowly, rhythmically, almost like breathing. I leaned closer, and right before the video feed glitched, just for a split second, I thought I saw my own reflection on the other side of the glass, but it wasn't moving the same way I was. Then the screen went black. The recording stopped on its own, and from outside, clear as day, came a sound. 3 slow knocks on my window. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what Doug said. No power, no tenant, empty since the fire. But if that was true, what had I been seeing? Who had been standing there all those nights? By afternoon, I made up my mind. I needed to see it for myself. The building across the alley wasn't locked. Its main door hung open a few inches. The paint around the frame bubbled and cracked from old heat damage. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and wet plaster. Every step I took echoed too loudly, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I found the stairs and climbed to the 3rd floor. The corridor was narrow and dim. Every door looked the same. Faded brown numbers, peeling paint, silence. When I reached Unit 3B, I knew immediately, even before I touched the doorknob. It was cold there, not just chilly, but wrongly cold, like standing near an open freezer. The doorknob turned easily, unlocked. Inside, everything was coated in a thin layer of dust. The wallpaper was stained with smoke, and the air, it had that sharp electric tang of old wiring and burnt plastic. No furniture, no curtains, no sign that anyone had lived there for years. But in the middle of the room, sitting on the floor, was a small metal desk lamp. It was the source of the blue light, still glowing faintly, though the cord hung loose and unplugged. I just stared at it, confused. The bulb was humming softly, a low vibration that made my teeth ache. I took a step closer, and something shifted in the reflection of the window. I froze. For a moment, I thought it was just my own reflection, until it blinked. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped. The reflection didn't move with me. It stayed right where it was, standing perfectly still, facing my window across the alley. Then, the lamp flickered once, twice, and went out. I don't remember how I got back to my building. All I remember is shutting my own door, locking it, and sliding down to the floor with my heart pounding. I didn't open the blinds that night, or the next. But 2 nights later, when I finally did, the blue light was back. Not from the other side of the alley this time, from inside my own apartment. It glowed softly against the walls, and in the glass reflection, there was someone standing behind me. I moved into the basement apartment in early March. It wasn't much, just a single room, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom with pipes that groaned like they hated being used. But rent was cheap, and I didn't have many options. The landlord, a quiet man in his 60s, told me there used to be another basement unit on the other side of the wall. He said it was sealed off years ago after some flooding issues. "Don't worry about it," he told me with a half smile. Completely sealed. You won't even notice it's there. He was wrong. The first few nights were peaceful enough. A little cold, maybe. Basements always are. But on the fourth night, around 12:30, I woke up to a faint sound. At first, I thought it was just my refrigerator kicking in, or the pipes settling. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow taps from somewhere behind the wall next to my bed. I held my breath and listened. The sound was steady, dull, too deliberate to be random. I turned off my fan and waited. For a while there was nothing. Then, knock, knock, knock. This time it was louder, almost like someone knocking from the other side. I got up, pressed my ear to the wall. It was cold, almost damp. The sound stopped when I touched it. I told myself it had to be the heating system, or maybe pipes expanding. It was an old building after all. I even Googled basement wall knocking noises, like an idiot, just to calm myself down. By 2 a.m. the apartment was silent again. I went back to bed, feeling stupid for letting it get to me. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. I stared at the ceiling, my heart racing. It was so clear this time I could almost feel it through the floorboards. After a minute, I did something I still can't explain. I knocked back. Once, twice. There was a pause. Then, 3 slow knocks answered me from the other side. I remember whispering out loud, "Hello? Who's there?" No answer, only silence. And then, one final knock, right where my head rested against the wall. The knocking didn't stop after that night. It came back the next evening, almost exactly at 12:30. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, then silence. The pattern never changed. 3, 2, 3, 2. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, hearing something that wasn't really there because I was expecting it. But then I started recording the sound on my phone. When I played it back, it was clear, sharp, deliberate. One night I opened my laptop and pulled up a Morse code translator online. I don't know why. Maybe I was just desperate to give the noise some kind of logic. When I matched the rhythm, 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, the translation spelled one thing, HELP. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were shaking a little. I played the audio again, matching it with the code, over and over. Every time, it said the same thing, help. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. Maybe the pipes really were making random noises, and I was just forcing meaning onto it. But the timing, it was too exact. Always the same time. Always the same rhythm. That weekend, I asked the guy who lived upstairs, a middle-aged man named Brian, if he'd ever heard anything strange at night. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, but then shrugged. Not really. Just the usual creaks. Why? I told him about the knocking. When I mentioned the wall next to my bed, his expression changed. He scratched his neck, hesitated, then said, "You're on the left side, right?" "Yeah, that used to be 2 units down there. They sealed the other one off last year." "Why?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "Flooding, I think. Or something like that. They redid the foundation and just walled it up." "Walled it up?" I repeated. He nodded. "Yeah, nobody's been in there since. You can still see where they patched over the door if you go around the back." That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept staring at the wall beside my bed, wondering how thick it really was, wondering what was behind it. The knocking came again around 12:30. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. I sat up, heart pounding. This time I didn't knock back. I just listened. After a long silence, I whispered, "Who are you?" There was no answer. But then, faintly, from somewhere deep within the wall, I heard something that didn't sound like knocking at all. It sounded like breathing. After that night, I started sleeping with headphones in. It didn't help much. Even through the music, I could still feel the knocks. They weren't always loud. Sometimes it was more like a dull vibration, just enough to remind me that the wall was still alive. About a week later, something changed. It wasn't the sound this time. It was the smell. It started faint, a sharp, metallic scent that came and went. At first I thought maybe something had died in the pipes, but then it grew stronger, sweeter, almost like rotting fruit mixed with rust. It seeped from the base of the wall near the bed. If I left the window closed, it got worse. It clung to my clothes, my sheets, even my skin. I called the landlord again, told him there might be something dead in the wall, or maybe mold. He sounded impatient, like I was bothering him. "Look," he said, "that part of the basement is sealed off. Completely. Don't mess with the wall, okay? I'll send someone next week." Next week never came. That night, the knocking returned. But it wasn't the same. It was slower, heavier, like someone dragging their hand across the wall instead of tapping. Then came the scratching. It started soft, like a mouse, but it grew louder, nails scraping, clawing, desperate. I sat frozen in bed, listening. The sound moved from one end of the wall to the other, and then it stopped, right behind the headboard. I pressed my ear against the wall again. The smell was thick now, sickly and warm. The surface of the wall felt colder than ice, and beneath it, I could hear it. A faint, wet sound. Breathing. I pulled away and stumbled into the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the floor until sunrise. When I finally came out, the smell was gone. No more scratching, no more breathing. For a few hours, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But that afternoon, I noticed something new. A hairline crack had formed near the baseboard of the wall, and from inside the crack, something dark had seeped through. A thin, dried trail that looked a lot like blood. I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, I packed a bag, grabbed my phone, and went straight to the police station. I told them everything: the knocking, the smell, the blood on the wall. I showed them the videos I'd recorded. The officer who listened to me, a tall guy with tired eyes, played the audio on my phone twice. Then he looked up at me and said, "Those are knocks, real ones. You can hear the echo." He called for another officer, and they agreed to come take a look. I didn't expect them to believe me, honestly. But when we got to my apartment, that smell hit us the moment I opened the door. Metallic, sweet, decaying. One of the officers covered his mouth and muttered, "Jesus." The other went straight to the wall. He tapped on it with his knuckle. It sounded hollow. He hit it again. 3 knocks. And from the other side, faint but clear, came 2 knocks in return. Everyone froze. We looked at each other, waiting for someone to explain it away, but nobody did. The older officer finally said, "Get the landlord." The landlord showed up 20 minutes later, pale and sweating. When they told him they needed to open the wall, he protested, said it wasn't safe, said it was sealed for a reason. But when the officer said they'd get a warrant if they had to, he gave in. They used a small crowbar first, prying at the edge near the floor. The moment the plaster cracked, the smell burst out stronger, a wave of hot, rotten air that made everyone step back. I thought I was going to throw up. The landlord kept muttering, "There's nothing in there, it's just old." But when the second officer pulled the rest of the panel free, his flashlight caught something. Scratches, dozens of them, deep gouges all over the inside of the wall, long, uneven marks, like someone had clawed at the surface from the other side. And near the center, in shaky letters drawn with something dark, a single word: HELP. The landlord went silent. The officers stared at it for a long time, whispering to each other. Then one of them turned to me and asked quietly, "When did you say this started?" That night, I stayed in a motel. I didn't want to go back there. But even in that silent room, I couldn't sleep. Because just before dawn, through the thin wall behind the bed, I heard it again. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. The police didn't find anything else. No body. No evidence of anyone living or dying inside that wall. Just the scratches. And that single word burned into the plaster. They sealed it back up the next day. Fresh drywall. New paint. The landlord said I could come back, but I told him I needed a few more days. He didn't argue. He probably didn't want to be there either. When I finally returned, the place felt different. Colder, hollow, like something had been removed, but the air hadn't noticed yet. I rearranged the furniture, moved my bed to the other side of the room, but no matter where I stood, I could still feel that wall behind me, like it was breathing. A week passed, then 2. I tried to pretend it was over, but the nights didn't feel right. The silence wasn't normal anymore. It was too heavy, too expectant. And sometimes, when I turned off the lights, I swore I could still smell that faint sweetness in the air. Then, one night, it happened again. It was around 1 a.m. I was half asleep when I heard it. Soft, barely there, but I knew the sound instantly. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. My heart started pounding. For a long moment there was nothing else. Then, pause. Knock, knock. I sat up slowly, staring at the wall across the room. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, but it came again, a little louder this time, echoing faintly through the floor. 3 knocks, 2 knocks. I whispered, "Please, stop." But the sound continued, almost gentle, almost human. The next day I told the landlord I was moving out. I packed everything in one night and didn't look back. But sometimes, when I lie awake in my new place, in total silence, I still hear it. 3. Pause. 2. And the worst part is, I don't know if it's coming from the wall or from somewhere beneath it. When I first moved into the building, I thought I'd gotten lucky. $800 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment in Minneapolis was almost unheard of. Sure, it was old, the kind of place where the walls had that faint cigarette-stained color no paint could hide. But it felt solid, safe. The landlord showed me around the day I moved in. "Laundry room's in the basement," he said. 2 washers, 2 dryers. Don't go down too late. Lights can flicker." He laughed a little when he said it, but there was something off about the way he avoided eye contact. The first week was fine. The neighbors kept to themselves. The halls smelled faintly of detergent and dust. But one night, after work, I realized I was out of clean clothes. It was nearly midnight, but I figured, who cares? It's just a basement. The stairwell leading down was narrow and damp, with one of those buzzing fluorescent lights that makes everything look sickly green. At the bottom was a metal door marked "Laundry, Tenants Only." When I pushed it open, the air inside hit me, warm, heavy, and wet. It smelled like soap and mildew and something else, something sour. One of the washers was running. The sound echoed around the empty room, a steady whirring, then a sharp click with each cycle. I remember thinking someone else must have decided to wash late, too. But when I turned the corner, I saw him, a man, standing perfectly still in front of the spinning washer, tall, soaking wet, as if he'd just stepped out of a storm. Water dripped from his sleeves onto the tile floor, forming small dark puddles around his shoes. He didn't look up when I entered, didn't speak, just stared into the small circular window of the washing machine like he was watching something inside it. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. No response. The machine clunked loudly, and for a second, I thought I saw his reflection in the glass. Mouth opened slightly, like he was whispering something. But the spin cycle started, and the noise drowned everything out. I waited a few seconds, then said, "Do you mind if I use the other one?" This time he turned, slowly. His eyes were pale, almost gray, and his lips looked colorless, like someone who'd been out in the cold too long. He didn't speak. He just stared for a few seconds too long, then gave me the smallest smile I've ever seen, and walked past me. The sound of his shoes, soaked, heavy, echoed all the way down the hall until it faded. I listened for the door to open or close. It never did. When I finished my laundry and went upstairs, I realized something strange. There were no wet footprints on the floor. not one. After that first night, I told myself it must have just been another tenant, maybe a neighbor from another floor. Weird, sure, but not supernatural. Minneapolis has plenty of quiet, strange people. I'd met a few already. But then I started seeing him again. Always late. Always around the same time, just past 11 p.m. Every time I went down to do laundry, he was there, standing in front of the same washer. Always wearing the same clothes, dark jacket, pale shirt underneath. Always soaked through, like he'd just walked through the rain. Even on dry nights. He never spoke, never even turned toward me unless I addressed him first. And when I did, he'd give that same tiny smile, the kind that felt too polite, too rehearsed. I tried asking where he lived. No answer. Tried joking about him being the midnight laundry guy. Nothing. The weird part was, the machine he used was always running when I arrived, always full, but I never saw him load it, and he never waited for it to finish. He just stood there, staring. One night, I forgot a bottle of detergent and had to go back upstairs to grab it. I was gone maybe 2 minutes, tops. When I came back, the man was gone. The washer door was open, and inside, tangled around a wet pile of clothes, was hair. Long strands of dark hair, floating in the water. Dozens of them. They clung to the glass like seaweed. I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of it. The clothes weren't mine. They looked old, pale, stretched, stained with something yellow-brown. The smell coming from inside was wrong. Not detergent, something metallic, like rust and mold. I backed away, heart hammering. Then I heard movement. A wet sound, shoes dragging across tile. Behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just the flickering fluorescent light and the hum of the machines. I stepped forward slowly, scanning the corners. Nothing. When I looked back at the washer, the door was closed again. The machine had started spinning, and for a split second, through the circular glass window, I thought I saw an eye staring back at me from inside. The next morning, I went straight to the property office on the first floor. The manager, a man named Cliff, was the kind of guy who looked permanently annoyed, like every question was one too many. I told him about the man I'd seen, the wet clothes, the hair in the machine. He frowned. "You said this was after 11 p.m. "Yeah," I said. "I thought maybe he lives on another floor." Cliff rubbed the back of his neck. "We don't have anyone who fits that description. And no one's supposed to be in the laundry room after 10. That's policy." I asked if there were cameras. He nodded toward the corner of the office, where a tiny monitor showed grainy black and white feeds from the hallways. Then he sighed. "Basement camera's been out for weeks. Wiring's corroded down there. Moisture gets in. I'll fix it when I can." He sounded like he'd said the same thing 100 times. Before I left, I asked if he'd ever heard of anyone breaking in, maybe a homeless person using the machines. He looked at me strangely. "You know," he said, "years back, before I took over, something did happen down there. Some guy, maybe homeless, maybe not, they found him in the laundry room. Gas leak or carbon monoxide, something like that. He'd been down there a while before anyone noticed." He paused, then shrugged. "They sealed the vent and replaced the dryers. No problem since I walked out of the office feeling colder than when I came in. Part of me wanted to laugh it off. Coincidence, I told myself. Just a story to scare new tenants. But another part of me, the one that had seen those wet footprints appear and disappear, couldn't shake the image. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight I heard the hum of machinery coming from below my floor. Faint, but unmistakable. The rhythm of a washing machine spinning. I got up, leaned close to the floor, and listened. It was definitely coming from the basement, the laundry room. But the door to that room should have been locked after 10. I threw on a hoodie and went downstairs, more angry than scared. The hall was quiet, lights flickering slightly. When I reached the basement door, I saw the lock hanging loose, like it had been forced open. I opened it slowly. The sound hit me immediately. A low, steady whir. Both machines were running. Steam filled the air, thick and warm, like a fog. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I took one step forward, and the sound stopped. Both machines shut off at the same time. The hum of the basement went dead silent. Then, in that still air, I heard a drip. One, then another. Water, falling from somewhere just out of sight. When I turned toward the corner, something dark moved. After that night, I stopped going down to the basement. For almost a week, I just ignored the pile of dirty clothes building up in my closet. Every time I thought about that door swinging open, the smell of wet air, the sound of those machines stopping all at once, my stomach turned. But the sounds didn't stop. Even when I stayed upstairs, I could hear them faintly through the vents, the slow churn of washing machines, the occasional clunk of the dryer, always after midnight. I told myself I needed proof, something I could show the manager, something real. So one night, I set my phone on video and left it recording on the top of the basement stairs. The camera faced the laundry room door, just barely visible under the flickering light. I left it running and went back upstairs. Didn't sleep much. The next morning, I checked the footage. At first it was nothing, an empty hallway, quiet except for the hum of the building. But around 11:58 p.m., the door at the bottom of the stairs creaked open by itself, just a few inches, and the faint sound of running water filled the air. Then, one of the machines started. You could hear it clearly, the slosh of water, the rumble of a spin cycle. But there was no one there. The camera never caught anyone entering or leaving. About 15 minutes in, the microphone picked up something else. Breathing. Slow, wet, uneven. It sounded close, too close to the phone, like someone was standing right behind it. Then came a faint tapping, metallic, steady, like fingers against the railing. The door opened wider, slowly, almost soundless. The frame went darker, like someone was standing just out of view. And then, suddenly, the feed glitched. Static filled the screen for exactly 3 seconds. When the image returned, the laundry room door was shut again, completely still, silent. But at the very end of the recording, maybe the last 5 seconds, there was something else. A reflection. In the circular window of one of the washers, barely visible in the low light, a pale face appeared, eyes open, mouth moving slowly, like it was whispering something. Then it faded, and the washer door blinked. I showed the video to Cliff, the building manager, the next morning. He barely glanced at the screen before shaking his head. "Probably a glitch," he said. "Those old cameras pick up interference all the time." I told him the machines were turning on by themselves, that the door had opened. He didn't even look up. "Laundry room's off limits after 10. You shouldn't have been down there in the first place." When I pushed him for an answer, he finally sighed and stood up. "Fine," he said. "I'll lock the damn thing." That evening, I heard him downstairs for almost an hour. The sound of chains clinking, metal scraping, the heavy slam of the basement door. When he came back up, his face looked pale and sweaty. He didn't say a word, just nodded at me and left. From that night on, the laundry room stayed locked. A thick chain across the handle, a new padlock shining under the flickering light. No one went in, and for a while, the building felt quieter, safer, until it rained. The first storm of the season hit 2 weeks later, heavy, cold rain pounding against the windows. I woke up around midnight to the same old sound, that deep, rhythmic hum I'd tried so hard to forget. At first I thought I was dreaming, but when I got up and pressed my ear to the floor, I could hear it clearly. The machines, spinning, churning, down in the basement. I grabbed my phone and crept down the stairs. Every step felt heavier, the air thicker. When I reached the basement landing, I saw it. The chains still in place, the lock still hanging tight. But from under the door, a thin stream of black water trickled out onto the concrete. The smell hit me a second later. Wet, rotten, like old laundry left too long in the washer. I crouched down, shining my phone light through the gap beneath the door. And in that narrow beam, I saw something move. A hand, pale, dripping, pressing lightly against the other side of the door, as if testing it. The metal creaked. Once. Then the hand slipped back into the darkness. I ran. The next day, the hallway smelled like bleach. The door was sealed again, painted over this time. No one mentioned it. No one asked questions. I moved out that weekend. And now, every time I hear the low rumble of a washer starting, even in a laundromat, even in a movie, I feel my stomach drop. Because sometimes, just under that mechanical rhythm, I swear I can hear someone breathing. The neighbor's dog that kept barking at my wall. Part 1. The new neighborhood. I moved to the neighborhood in late September, right before the weather turned cold. The house wasn't new, built sometime in the 70s, with wood siding that creaked every time the wind shifted. But it had a porch, a decent yard, and most importantly, peace. After the divorce, that's all I wanted. The street was called Maple Hollow Lane, one of those quiet suburban stretches outside Cleveland, where every mailbox looked the same, and every lawn was trimmed within an inch of its life. My next-door neighbors were an older couple named Don and Marlene. They had a big yellow Labrador named Buddy, the kind of dog who wagged his tail so hard his whole body followed. At least during the day. The first night I slept there, Buddy started barking. Not your usual, there's a squirrel kind of bark. It was deeper, frantic, like he was warning someone off. It went on for a good 10 minutes before I finally got up and looked outside. The dog was standing in Don's yard, facing my house. Not the yard, not the trees, my house. Specifically, the side wall facing the kitchen. I called out to him, softly at first. "Hey, buddy, it's okay." He didn't even flinch. His tail was stiff, ears back, eyes fixed on the wall like something was there. Eventually, Don came out in his robe and pulled him inside, apologizing across the fence. "Sorry about that," he said. "He's been weird lately. Must have heard a raccoon or something." I laughed it off, said no problem, and went back inside. But once I was in bed, I realized the sound hadn't completely stopped. Every few minutes I could hear Buddy whining, soft, uneasy, followed by the faint scrape of his paws against the siding, like he was trying to dig through it. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same direction. By the third night, I was more annoyed than concerned. I stood by the kitchen window, watching through the blinds. There he was, same spot, facing the wall, barking at something I couldn't see. But this time, he wasn't looking at the siding. He was looking slightly higher, like he could see something moving behind it. I pressed my hand against the wall where he was staring. Cold, still, nothing unusual. But later, when the barking finally stopped and the neighborhood went quiet again, I heard something else. A soft, dull thump from inside the wall. Once, then again. Like someone knocking from behind it. The next few nights followed the same routine. Around 10:45, Buddy would start pacing the fence line, whining under his breath. By 11, he'd be barking again, low and sharp, like every sound was a warning. Always facing the same wall. I tried ignoring it. I even played music to drown it out. But when I turned the volume down, I realized something worse. The barking wasn't the only sound anymore. There was a knock. Faint at first, a small tap against the inside of my kitchen wall. I stood there, frozen, listening. Another tap, then another. Slow, steady, like someone tapping their fingernails on wood. I walked over and pressed my ear to the drywall. Nothing. Then, right against my ear, 3 sharp knocks. I jumped back. My heart was pounding. The sound was so close I could feel the vibration through the floor. I told myself it had to be mice, or air in the pipes. But when I grabbed a broom handle and knocked back, once, twice, something knocked back. Exactly the same rhythm. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear it again. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Like a pattern. The next morning I went next door. Marlene answered the door, Buddy's leash wrapped around her wrist. He was calm in the daylight, wagging his tail like nothing had happened. "Hey," I said, "has Buddy been acting strange lately? Like barking at my place at night?" She frowned. "Yeah, sorry about that. Don says it's the old storage room on that side. It used to connect our houses, like a shared mudroom, but it was sealed off years ago. You can't even get to it anymore." "Sealed off?" I asked. "Why?" She hesitated, then said, "The previous owners told us the wall cracked during a storm. They just boarded it up instead of fixing it. That was, God, the 70s, I think." Buddy started growling softly. Not at me, at the side of the house again. The fur along his neck stood straight up. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. A sealed room, a boarded-up wall. I'd seen enough old houses to know that wood rots, space shrinks. Sometimes sound travels. That's what I told myself. Until just past midnight, when I heard it again. 3 knocks, pause, 2. I waited, heart racing. Then I whispered, "Who's there?" The knocking stopped. For a moment there was silence, and then, faint but clear, a single muffled bark from inside the wall. The next day, I decided to check the wall myself. I moved the kitchen table aside and tapped along the drywall. Most of it sounded solid, but near the baseboard, just where Buddy always stared, it was hollow. Too hollow. I crouched down, pressing my ear against it. At first, nothing. Then a faint hiss of air, like someone exhaling. It was warm, moving. I jerked back, heart pounding. The air in the room felt heavier somehow. Damp, sour. The kind of smell you notice right before it rains. I thought about calling Don, but I didn't want to sound crazy. So I did what any idiot homeowner does when they hear something weird. I grabbed a screwdriver and pried at the edge of the molding. The wood came off easier than I expected. Behind it, there was a thin crack running up the wall, just wide enough to see darkness behind. I shined my phone flashlight into it. The light didn't hit the back. There was space in there. Empty space. That's when Buddy started barking again. Loud, frantic, so loud I could feel it through the floorboards. I ran to the window. He was right there, standing on the edge of his yard, staring straight at me through the glass. His eyes weren't wild this time. They looked scared. Then he did something strange. He whimpered once and stepped backward, like he was afraid of me. That night, I moved a chair against the kitchen wall, half as a joke, half as a barrier. Around midnight, I heard it again. Not just knocking this time, scraping, slow and dragging, like something with nails pulling across wood from the other side. The sound moved upward, toward the ceiling, then stopped. I didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, right above me, a single, deep thud. The ceiling light flickered. Somewhere outside, Buddy howled. Long, low, and then nothing. When morning came, I checked the spot again. The crack had widened overnight, and on the inside edge of the molding, faint but visible, were deep scratches. 5 of them, like fingernail marks. The next morning, I called a contractor. Told him there might be water damage or a raccoon nest inside the wall. He came by in the afternoon. A short guy named Eric, with a heavy tool belt and a look that said he'd seen too many weird things in old houses. He tapped the wall a few times and frowned. "Yeah, that's not solid." "There's space behind it." "Like a crawl space?" I asked. He shook his head. "More like a room. Small one. Old houses around here sometimes had service passages between properties. Most of them got sealed up decades ago. When he started cutting into the drywall, the smell hit us. Rot, mold, and something else. Something sweet and metallic, like rusted water mixed with fruit." Eric gagged and covered his nose. "Jesus," he muttered. "Something died in there?" He widened the hole with his crowbar, breaking off panels of wood until we could see inside. There was a room, narrow, no bigger than a closet, lined with cracked plaster. A single broken bulb hung from a cord in the ceiling, long dead. On the floor sat an old wooden chair, half rotted. Next to it, a small table with a glass jar on top, filled with something murky, brownish. And beside that, a pile of children's clothes, tiny shirts, a red shoe, a stuffed toy dog torn open, its cotton spilling out. Eric cursed under his breath and shined his flashlight deeper. Man, somebody bricked this up on purpose. I stepped closer, feeling the air grow colder. The walls inside were covered in marks, little scratches, all clustered low near the baseboards. And on one section, faint but still visible beneath the mold, someone had drawn a circle. Inside it, a name, Buddy. I froze. Eric didn't notice. He was pointing at something near the back of the space, a small metal latch built into the floor, like the edge of a trap door. Probably another vent, he said, kneeling to inspect it. When he touched it, the metal creaked, softly, like it hadn't been opened in decades. That's when Buddy started barking again, furious this time. I could hear him outside, right through the wall. Eric stood up fast. The hell's that dog's problem? I didn't answer. I was staring at the latch, because while the dog barked, it started to move, just a little, like something underneath was pushing back. Eric backed away slowly. Hey man, maybe we seal this up and call animal control, yeah? But the latch twitched again. Then it stopped. The barking outside cut off instantly. For a moment, the entire house went silent. No wind, no creaks, just the faint drip of water somewhere in the pipes. When I ran outside to check, Buddy was gone. I didn't see Buddy again after that day. Don and Marlene spent hours walking around the neighborhood calling his name, shaking a box of treats. Nothing. No tracks in the mud. No torn leash. Just gone. 2 days later, police cars showed up. At first I thought maybe someone had found him. But then I saw the look on Don's face. He wasn't holding the leash anymore. One of the officers knocked on my door. He asked a few questions. How long I'd lived here, if I'd heard anything strange, if I'd recently done any work on the house. When I told him about the contractor and the wall, his expression changed. They made me step outside while they searched. It didn't take long. The officer came out after about 15 minutes. He looked pale, told me not to go back in just yet. Then I heard Eric, the contractor, shouting something from inside. A moment later, they carried something out, wrapped in a black tarp. I didn't ask. I didn't have to. Later that evening, Don came over. He didn't say much, just stood there on my porch, eyes red, hands shaking. They said they found him in your wall, he whispered, inside the space, behind the boards. Then he turned and walked away. After that, the authorities sealed the room completely. New drywall, new insulation. The smell lingered for weeks. I moved out before winter came. Didn't even take half my stuff. The house was listed again a month later. Bright photos online, sunlight streaming through the same kitchen windows. The ad called it quiet suburban charm. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about that wall, how sound carries, how sometimes it doesn't. And on rainy nights, if I close my eyes long enough, I swear I can still hear it, that faint, rhythmic sound. 3 knocks, pause, 2, and somewhere beneath it all, the soft, tired bark of a dog trying to warn me. I moved into the house on Brookridge Street in late February. It was one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods you only see in real estate flyers. Tree-lined sidewalks, white fences, the distant hum of traffic from the highway miles away. After 3 years of apartment living, I wanted space, somewhere I could breathe. The house itself was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a narrow yard, and a large bay window that faced the property next door. The previous owner had left behind lace curtains and a faint smell of cedar in the hall closet. It felt lived in, comfortable. The first evening was uneventful. I unpacked, made coffee, sat on the couch, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. It felt good, the kind of silence you don't realize you've missed. Then, just before midnight, I looked out the window. There was a light on in the house next door, a faint yellow glow coming from a second-story window, and someone was standing there. A man, tall, maybe in his 50s, with a clean white shirt that caught the light. He wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, looking toward me. I couldn't tell if he could actually see me. My lights were off. But after a moment, he lifted his hand and waved. It wasn't a big, friendly wave, just a slow, deliberate motion, like he was acknowledging me. I hesitated, then raised my hand and waved back, half out of politeness. He didn't move again, just stayed there, hands still raised, until the light in his window flickered. Then it went dark. The next morning, I saw the older woman who lived there, short, gray hair, watering her front garden. I introduced myself, said I'd just moved in, and mentioned that I'd seen someone in her upstairs window the night before. She looked confused. "Upstairs?" she said. "Oh, honey, there's no one up there. That floor's been closed off for years. I had it sealed after my husband passed. Keeps the drafts out." I must have looked surprised because she gave a small, nervous laugh. "Don't worry. Probably just the reflection of my lamp. These old windows play tricks on you at night." I smiled, nodded, and pretended to believe her. But that evening, when the sun went down and the neighborhood lights began to fade, I couldn't help myself. I looked again. The light in the upstairs window was on, and the man was there, watching, still as stone. He lifted his hand once more, and waved. Only this time, I didn't wave back, because just as his hand fell, the light in his room flicked off, and the faint outline of his face lingered in the dark for a few seconds longer than it should have. For the next few nights, I tried not to look. I really did. But every time the clock edged past 11:30, my eyes drifted toward that window, almost on their own. And every time he was there, same spot, same white shirt, same faint yellow light behind him. The first few times he didn't move at all, just stood there, watching. Then, on the fourth night, he lifted his hand and waved again. That slow, stiff motion, like he was underwater. I turned away, trying to ignore it. But curiosity has a way of chewing through your nerves. So the next evening, I set my phone up on the windowsill and hit record. I figured if I could catch it on video, I'd prove it was a trick of the light, some weird reflection, maybe even my imagination. When I checked the recording the next morning, my stomach dropped. The video showed the empty window across the yard. No man, no light, just darkness. But at exactly 11:33, the reflection in my own window changed. For half a second, I could see myself standing there, and behind me the outline of a man. I rewound it 10 times, thinking it had to be a shadow, maybe a glitch. But every time, the figure's head tilted slightly, just like the man in the other window. That afternoon, I called the police. I told them someone might be trespassing in the house next door. 2 officers showed up within 20 minutes. I watched from my porch as they spoke to the older woman. She looked embarrassed, kept shaking her head. Then the officers went inside. They stayed maybe 5 minutes before coming out again, one of them shrugging at me. "Nothing up there," he said. "Dusty as hell, but no signs of anyone. The upstairs floor's sealed tight. You probably saw your own reflection." They laughed politely, and I pretended to laugh too. But that night, at exactly 11:30, the light came on again. The man appeared, still as ever. And this time, he wasn't facing me. He was turned slightly to the side, like he was looking past me, at something behind me. I pulled out my phone again, hands shaking, and hit record. After a few seconds, the light in his window flickered and went dark. I glanced down at the screen. In the reflection of my own window, something moved, a pale hand, right behind my shoulder. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house sounded closer. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. I kept replaying that video in my head, the pale hand behind me, that impossible reflection. By the time morning came, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Light distortion, camera artifact, something rational. But that night, The routine began again. 11:30 p.m., light on. The man in the window. Only this time, I noticed something new. The curtains on his side were slightly open. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the faint outline of a face. He wasn't smiling, wasn't even blinking, just watching. I pulled the blinds shut, turned off the lights, tried to focus on the sound of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, anything but the thought of that window. Then 3 knocks, soft, right behind me. I froze. It wasn't the front door, it was the window. My living room window, the same one that faced his. The sound came again. 3 slow taps, like fingernails. My throat went dry. I pulled the curtain aside just an inch, and there he was, standing in my yard. Not in his window, in my yard. He was closer now, only a few feet away, separated by the glass. The same pale face, same lifeless stare. He raised his hand, slowly, and waved. For a moment I couldn't move. I just stared back, my breath fogging the glass. Then I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. When I looked back up, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just the faint condensation where his breath had been on the other side of the glass. The police came within minutes. They searched the yard, the neighboring property, even checked the old woman's upstairs again. Nothing. No footprints in the snow, no open doors. One of the officers looked at me and said gently, "Maybe someone's playing a prank on you. Happens more often than you'd think." But I knew what I saw. And when they left, I walked back to the window to lock it again, even though I already had. That's when I noticed something. On the outside of the glass, right at eye level, a single handprint. Smudged. Too large to be mine. For a few days, nothing happened. The window stayed dark. The nights were silent again. I started to believe maybe the police were right. Maybe someone had been playing a prank, and now they'd stopped. Then one afternoon, I saw the old woman again. She was sitting on her porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl despite the mild weather, her eyes fixed on the house across from hers. When she noticed me, she waved me over. "You've seen him, haven't you?" she said quietly. There was no preamble, no small talk, just that question. I froze. "Who?" She looked toward her house, toward the upstairs window. "The man in the window," she said. Her voice trembled. "You shouldn't look at him for too long." I sat down slowly. "I thought you said no one lived up there." Her hands tightened on her cane. "No one does," she whispered. "Not anymore." Then she told me about Raymond. He'd been her husband. He died in that house nearly 20 years ago. Heart attack, they said, though some folks in the neighborhood liked to tell it differently. After his death, she couldn't bring herself to go upstairs. She sealed the door, painted over the frame, and left everything exactly as it had been. His clothes still hanging in the closet, his shoes by the bed, even his glasses on the nightstand. For years, she'd occasionally hear the faint sound of footsteps overhead, but when she called the police, they found nothing. So she stopped calling. She told herself it was the pipes, the wood settling, grief. Then one night, she looked up from her garden and saw him standing in the window, just as he used to before dinner, watching her, smiling, waving. Her voice cracked when she said it. "I knew it wasn't him," she said, but I couldn't not wave back. She turned to me then, her eyes sharp despite the fear. "You shouldn't have acknowledged him. That's how it starts." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there while she stared at the house, at my window now, as if waiting for something to appear. When the sun went down that night, I told myself I wouldn't look. I shut the curtains, turned on the TV, tried to ignore the restless feeling in my chest. But around 11:30, the room grew cold, the kind of cold that comes from inside the walls. And then I heard it. 3 soft taps against the glass. I turned my head, slow, terrified, and there he was again, the man from the window. Only this time, he wasn't waving. He was leaning close, his forehead against the glass, his breath fogging the pain. His eyes looked wrong, Too dark, too wide. And then he lifted his hand, not to wave, but to knock. 3 slow knocks. And as he did, I realized something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't outside anymore. The sound was coming from inside the window. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't tell anyone the real reason, just said the neighborhood wasn't for me. The old woman didn't come outside to say goodbye. Her upstairs window stayed dark, curtain drawn tight. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me as I loaded the last box into my car. The new place was only 20 minutes away. Same town, newer house, less history. I told myself it was over, that maybe the stress had made me see things. For the first few nights, everything was normal. No late night lights, no knocks, no man in the window. Until Thursday. I was on my laptop, scrolling through listings for furniture when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something, I don't know what, made me pick up. "Hey," a man's voice said. "You used to live on Brookridge Street, right?" "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Who is this?" He laughed nervously. "Sorry, I just moved in there." "Didn't mean to bother you, but, weird question." There was a pause. Then, "Did you ever notice anyone next door? A guy who waves from the window at night?" My mouth went dry. He kept talking. "He's there almost every evening around 11:30. Old guy, white shirt, kind of just staring. He waved at me yesterday. I waved back. Now he's there every night. I couldn't breathe." The hum of the refrigerator behind me faded into a dull roar. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "Don't look at him," I said quietly. "Don't wave back. Just close your curtains." He laughed again, uneasy. "Yeah, okay. You sound like my girlfriend. Anyway, just wanted to check if that was normal." He hung up a second later. I sat there in silence, phone still in my hand, staring at my own reflection in the darkened window across the room. And for a split second, just long enough for my heart to stop, I saw movement. A figure, standing behind me, tall, still, wearing a white shirt. He lifted his hand and waved. I moved into the house on Willow Court in early spring, when the air still carried that thin chill from winter. It wasn't much, just a one-story place with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. But it was mine. After the divorce, I needed a clean start. A quiet street. Somewhere I could breathe again. The first person I met was Calvin, my next-door neighbor. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. Short-cropped gray hair, plaid shirts. The kind of man who looked like he'd spent his whole life fixing things. He showed up my first afternoon there, carrying a plate of brownies wrapped in foil. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, smiling. "Name's Calvin. If you need anything, tools, a hand with the yard, whatever, I'm right next door." He had that easy charm older men sometimes have. Polite, steady, the kind that makes you trust them without thinking twice. Over the next week, I saw him often. He mowed his lawn every other day, always waving when I drove by. He'd bring in my trash bins before I could get to them. Once, when a storm blew through, he left a note on my porch that said, "Secured your fence before it snapped. Don't worry about it." See, it felt nice, honestly. After months of tension and silence, having someone care, even a little, was comforting. But then, little things started to stand out. One morning, I came out to find a steaming cup of coffee sitting on my porch rail. I hadn't made it. When I looked around, Calvin was outside trimming his hedge. He smiled and called out, "Thought you might like your coffee the way you take it. 2 sugars, no cream." I froze. I had never told him that, not once. Another day, I came home late from work to find my garbage already on the curb, perfectly sorted for collection. When I thanked him the next morning, he just shrugged. "Wasn't me," he said, "but someone's looking out for you." That night, I started double-checking the locks, just to be safe. Still, I tried to tell myself it was harmless. People in small towns are like that, friendly, observant. But the thing that unsettled me most wasn't what Calvin did. It was how much he seemed to know. He knew the day my ex came to pick up the last of his things, even though I hadn't told anyone he was coming. He knew my cat's name. He knew I worked from home on Thursdays, and when I asked how he knew all that, he just smiled. "Good neighbors notice things," he said. "Helps keep you safe." That night, I made sure every window was locked before bed. I turned off the lights, lay down, and tried to tell myself I was overreacting. But as I was drifting off, I heard it. Soft, slow footsteps across the porch. Then a low whisper, close enough to the front door for me to hear every word. "Good night, Ellie." It started with the little things, the kind of details you don't notice at first. Not because they're subtle, but because you don't want to notice them. The first time, I thought it was me. A coffee mug left out when I could have sworn I'd put it in the dishwasher. A lamp turned on that I didn't remember switching. My cat, Luna, hiding in the corner, tail puffed out, staring at the front door like she'd seen something. Then came the smell. Cologne. Not mine. I didn't wear any. It lingered in the hallway one morning, faint but unmistakable. A musky, old-fashioned scent, like something from the 90s. That same morning, I found the back door unlocked. I knew I'd locked it. I had checked, twice. I changed my locks that afternoon, bought new ones from the hardware store in town, the kind you install yourself. When Calvin saw me struggling with the screwdriver, he appeared at the fence line, smiling that same patient smile. "Need a hand?" I shook my head quickly. "No, I got it." He nodded but didn't leave, just stood there, watching me work, hands in his pockets. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he said, "You shouldn't worry so much. Nobody around here locks their doors. It's a safe neighborhood." I didn't respond. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, even the faint creak of the floorboards when the house settled. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. The back door handle. A soft metallic click. Then, silence. Luna hissed, low and sharp. I held my breath, listening. After what felt like forever, I got up and crept into the kitchen. Nothing. The door was shut, but on the counter sat the same coffee mug from that morning. Only now, it was full, still steaming. I dropped it in the sink and ran to check the locks again. All three were still in place. The deadbolt, the chain, the latch. That's when I noticed the tiny scratches around the keyhole, fresh, shallow, like someone had been testing a key that almost fit. The next morning, I set a small trap. I placed an upside-down coffee mug on the doorknob, just to see if it would move. When I came down for breakfast, the mug was gone. I found it lying on the floor near the back door, handle cracked clean off. The next day, I called a locksmith. I didn't tell him why, just said I'd lost a spare key and wanted a fresh set made. He changed both locks and gave me 2 new copies. I kept one in my purse and hid the other under a floorboard in the laundry room. No one else had access. That night, I finally slept through without hearing a sound. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like mine again. Until the following morning. I woke up to sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. The air smelled faintly of coffee. When I turned toward the counter, there it was again, my mug. Still warm, steam rising. I dropped it. Porcelain shattered across the tile. It couldn't be real. I checked every door, every window, all locked. Deadbolts tight, nothing broken. I was shaking when I saw Calvin in his driveway, loading tools into his truck. He waved cheerfully. "Morning, Ellie. You sleep all right?" I wanted to scream. Ask him how he knew I hadn't been sleeping. Ask him if he'd been inside. But I didn't. I just smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." That afternoon, I ordered a smart doorbell camera. Installed it myself the moment it arrived. If anyone came to my porch again, I'd know. That small lens became my comfort. A glass eye watching over the house even when I couldn't. For 2 nights, nothing. Then, on the 3rd, my phone buzzed with a motion alert at 2:17 a.m. The feed opened to static for a second, then cleared. There he was, Calvin, standing directly in front of the camera, close enough that the lens distorted his face. He wasn't doing anything, just staring into it, smiling faintly. Not the friendly kind of smile, something colder, measured, like he wanted me to know he knew I was watching. I froze, watching the timestamp tick by. He stayed there for nearly 30 seconds before walking off screen. I called the police. They arrived quickly, but Calvin was back in his house by then, lights off, pretending to sleep. The officers checked my footage, shrugged, and said he hadn't done anything illegal. Try to get a restraining order, one of them suggested. But you'll need more than that. More than that. Like what? Blood? That night, I sat in bed clutching my phone, waiting for another alert. None came, just silence, until I heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of metal turning inside the front door lock. A slow click, then another. Someone was trying keys. I crept to the hallway, holding my breath. Through the frosted glass of the door, I saw a shadow move, broad shoulders, a familiar outline. The sound stopped. Then came a whisper, almost gentle. "Don't worry, Ellie. I'll never let anyone hurt you." 2 days passed before I could bring myself to stay home alone again. I worked late at the library, told myself the extra hours were helping me catch up. But really, I just didn't want to be there after dark. Friday afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The sky was still pale, sunlight slipping through the blinds. Luna met me at the door, fur on end, hissing. At first, I thought maybe a bird had gotten inside. Then I heard it, a faint shuffle from upstairs. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. It was my house. I grabbed the heaviest thing within reach, a flashlight, and crept up the stairs. The second floor was quiet, too quiet. I checked each room, bathroom, spare bedroom, hall closet. Nothing. Then, from my own bedroom, came a soft thud, like someone had just set something down. I froze at the doorway. The curtains were drawn tight, light dim and gold through the fabric. And on my nightstand was a steaming mug of coffee. The same mug. The same 2 sugars, no cream. I could see it still trembling slightly, fresh, still hot. My hand shook as I backed toward the hallway. That's when I saw the closet door. It was slightly open. I didn't check it. I ran. By the time the police arrived, I was standing in the driveway, clutching Luna, shaking so hard my teeth hurt. They went through the house, guns drawn. Nothing. No one. Not even footprints on the carpet upstairs. But one of the officers called me into the bedroom. He pointed to something under the bed. A small wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. All of me, sleeping, cooking, working at my desk, changing clothes. There was a lock of my hair inside, and at the very bottom, a small key, identical to the one I'd hidden under the laundry room floorboard. My stomach turned. The officer asked if I knew anyone who might have had access. I just looked toward the window. From there, you could see directly into Calvin's upstairs bedroom. The curtains were open for the first time since I'd moved in, and behind the glass, in the dim light, I could see him, standing perfectly still, staring back at me. He smiled. Then he raised his coffee mug and took a slow, deliberate sip. I moved out 3 days later. Didn't pack everything, just what fit in the car. I told the landlord I was breaking the lease and didn't care about the deposit. He didn't even ask why. Maybe he already knew. The new apartment was smaller but bright. Second floor, good locks, no shared yard. For the first time in months, I slept without waking up to sounds that didn't belong. No footsteps, no whispers, no coffee. I got a new number, new job, even started using a different name on social media. Every trace of my old life, gone. Or so I thought. One morning, about 3 weeks after the move, I came home from work to find a small package on my doorstep. No return address. No postage. just my name written neatly across the top. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. It was light. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my new bedroom, the curtains drawn halfway, and me, asleep. Pinned to the photo was a folded note, written in the same careful handwriting as the one he'd left on my porch that first week. "You look better when you're rested. Don't worry, I found you again." I dropped it, ran to the door, locked it, bolted it. Every instinct told me to call the police, but I didn't, because deep down, I knew what they'd say. He hadn't done anything. Yet. That night I barely slept. Every creak in the apartment made me flinch. I kept thinking I heard breathing. Not outside, but inside. When I finally did fall asleep, I woke to the faint sound of the coffee maker dripping. Slow, rhythmic, steady. And there, on the counter beside my phone, was a steaming mug. 2 sugars, no cream. When I first moved to Crestwood Lane, I thought I'd finally found peace. It was the kind of street people picture when they say, quiet neighborhood. Old trees, fresh paint, lawns trimmed just enough to look lived in but not showy. After the divorce, I needed quiet more than anything. The rental was small, 1 story, beige siding, and a sagging mailbox that leaned like it had seen too many winters. Perfect for being alone. Across the street stood a larger, older house, pale blue with black shutters. The windows were dusty, curtains drawn, and the front steps were cracked straight through. The realtor had told me it had been empty for a long time. She said it like that meant safe. On my first night there, I sat on the couch with a beer and looked out the window at it. Completely dark. No porch light. No cars in the driveway. Just the faint glimmer of moonlight reflecting off the upstairs window. I didn't think about it again until 3 nights later. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when I noticed something different. Through the bathroom window, across the street, the second-floor light in that empty house was on. It wasn't bright, more like a soft amber glow leaking through the dusty curtains. It flickered once, then steadied. I checked the time, 11:42 p.m. I watched it for a while, waiting for someone to appear. Maybe a realtor checking the place, or a new tenant moving in. But nothing moved. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to my neighbor, a retired woman named Carol who lived 2 doors down. Her smile faded when I pointed at the blue house. "Oh, honey," she said quietly, "don't worry about that place." "What do you mean?" She looked at me like she wanted to say more but didn't. "Some houses just remember things," she said finally. Then she changed the subject. That night, the light came on again. Same time, same soft amber glow, and I could swear I saw the curtain shift, just a little, like someone had moved behind it. I told myself it was wind, or maybe a raccoon got in through a broken window. But the next night, it happened again. And this time, I watched closer. At 11:42, the light blinked on. A few seconds later, the curtain moved, and behind it, a shadow. It wasn't moving like someone walking past. It was still, perfectly still. Then, slowly, the shadow's head turned, until it faced my house. By the end of the first week, the pattern was undeniable. The light across the street came on every single night at exactly 11:42 p.m. Not a minute before, not a minute after. It didn't matter what I was doing, washing dishes, reading, lying in bed. I'd glance up and there it was, the same soft amber glow, pulsing faintly through the curtains. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a timer from when someone still lived there, or a leftover security system no one turned off. But that theory stopped making sense after the power outage. A thunderstorm had rolled through one evening, knocking out electricity across the entire block. The street went pitch black. No porch lights, no TVs, nothing but rain. I remember sitting by the window, listening to the storm, when I noticed it again. The light, bright as ever, the only thing glowing on the whole street. It flickered twice, steadied, then stayed on. Even through the blackout, I recorded it on my phone, zooming in until the frame blurred. The upstairs window glowed like an eye watching through the rain. I posted the clip to a small paranormal forum later that night. Most people laughed it off. Malfunctioning motion sensor, reflection from your own house, Photoshop. But one comment stood out. Don't watch the light directly. Watch the space beside it. The next night I did. I waited at my window, lights off, phone ready. At 11:42, the glow bloomed behind the curtain. And this time, instead of staring at the center, I watched the dark sliver beside it. That's when I saw movement. Someone was standing there, a tall figure, their outline visible against the pale fabric. They weren't moving, just facing my house. I held my breath, zoomed in again, and took a photo. The light flickered, then the curtain twitched, like a hand brushing it aside. The light burst brighter, almost like a camera flash. I jumped, dropped my phone. When I picked it up again, the window was dark. I checked the time, 11:43. The light had gone out. The next morning, I reviewed the footage frame by frame. For most of it, the window was blank. But in one single still frame, between flickers, there was a face. Not fully visible, just pale skin, dark eyes, the curve of a mouth. But it wasn't facing the window. It was facing the camera. The next morning, I went to see Carol again. She was out in her yard, watering her rose bushes like always, wearing a faded sun hat that looked older than both of us. When she saw me coming, her face tightened. "You shouldn't stare at that house," she said, before I even opened my mouth. I stopped on the sidewalk. "Then tell me why." She turned off the hose and leaned on her cane. "That used to be the Harris place. You ever hear about them?" I shook my head. Her eyes drifted to the house across the street. "They moved here in the late 90s. Nice family, John and Elaine, and their little girl, Abby. You'd see her out front drawing chalk on the sidewalk every weekend. Then one night, poof, gone, all three." I frowned. "Gone how?" "No one really knows. The police said it was murder-suicide, but folks around here, we remember different." She looked around as if making sure no one was listening. "When they found John, he was hanging in the living room. But Elaine and Abby, they never found them. Not a drop of blood. Just one thing written on the wall in red marker. What did it say?" Carol's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're still here." A chill ran through me. She picked up her watering can again, her voice going flat. "The place has been empty ever since. Realtors can't keep it on the market. But if you're seeing lights, maybe it's time to keep your curtains shut." That night, I sat in the dark, phone in hand, eyes glued to the blue house. 11:40, 11:41. Then, at 11:42, the light came on. But this time, it wasn't one light. It was two. Both upstairs windows glowed softly, side by side, like eyes opening. I swallowed hard, recording again. The right window flickered, and I thought I saw someone move. Not one person, but two figures. A taller one standing near the window, and something smaller beside it. For a moment, the smaller figure lifted its hand, like it was waving. I blinked, and the lights went out. Both of them. The next morning, I called the local historical society, pretending to be writing an article about the neighborhood. The woman on the phone sounded surprised. "Oh, the Harris home? It's funny you ask. That property doesn't exist in our current records." "What do you mean?" "I mean there's no listing for 412 Crestwood Lane. It ends at 410. According to our records, that lot was demolished in 2003. I looked out my window, at the blue house standing right across the street. Still there, still whole, still waiting for nightfall. By Sunday, I couldn't take it anymore. I told myself I was going over there just to prove something, that it was all in my head, that it was just some squatters, or a faulty circuit, or anything that could be explained. It was just after 11 when I crossed the street. The air felt heavier there, still and damp like the inside of a basement. No sound, no crickets, not even the wind. Up close, the blue paint on the siding looked more gray, streaked with water stains. The front door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been careless closing it, or had never left. I hesitated on the porch, phone in one hand, flashlight in the other. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Hello?" No answer. The smell hit me first when I stepped inside. Dust, wood rot, and something faintly metallic, like old coins. The floor creaked under every step. Cobwebs hung from the corners like curtains. Everything was coated in a thin layer of gray, except for the footprints, fresh ones, leading toward the stairs. I followed them, heart pounding, the beam of my flashlight trembling over the wallpaper. Halfway up the steps, a light clicked on overhead. One of the hallway bulbs, dim, yellow, humming faintly. Then another, and another. They flickered to life one by one, matching the rhythm of my footsteps, like the house was anticipating me. When I reached the landing, I could hear something else. A low, static buzz, the kind that comes from an old TV left on in another room. The sound was coming from the last door at the end of the hall, the one glowing faintly around the edges. I turned the handle. It opened easily. Inside, the room was bare except for a television sitting on the floor, its screen alive with static and faint shapes moving beneath the noise. For a second, I thought it was playing a channel that hadn't existed in decades. Then I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't random static, it was me. The screen showed my own living room, my couch, my lamp, even the beer can I'd left on the table earlier that night. The angle was from across the street, from this very room. And as I stood there, frozen, the static shifted. The feed changed. Now it showed the staircase, the one right behind me. Someone was coming up. The creak of the steps was soft but steady, slow, measured. I turned, flashlight trembling toward the doorway. "Who's there?" No answer. Just another step, closer. Then, from the corner of my eye, the TV screen flickered again, and this time I saw it clearly. A man, pale and grinning, standing just behind me. The light bulb above me burst. Everything went black. They found me the next morning. The police, I mean. Carol must have called them after she saw my front door standing open. They said I was sitting on the couch when they came in, just sitting there, staring out the window at the blue house. I don't remember any of it. All I remember is the light. They told me later that the house across the street was empty. No sign anyone had been there in years. No power, no wiring, no furniture. Just a pile of broken glass in the upstairs hallway, and a single television unplugged from the wall. When they tried to turn it on, nothing happened, but the dust pattern around it. It looked like someone had been kneeling there recently. The cops told me to get some rest. I tried, but that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop watching the clock. 11:39, 11:40, 11:41. I told myself I wouldn't look, that whatever I'd seen wasn't real. But when the numbers flicked to 11:42, my body moved on its own. I turned my head toward the window. And there it was again, that soft amber glow, bleeding through the curtains of the house across the street. Except this time, the light wasn't in their window, it was in mine. A quiet hum filled the room, the faint buzz of static. I turned slowly toward the corner, heart pounding, breath caught halfway in my throat. The TV I'd never owned sat there, screen flickering with white noise. And through the static, faint shapes began to form. My couch, my lamp, my reflection sitting right where I was. Only one thing was different. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. There was someone standing behind me, tall, pale, smiling. And then, from the other side of the glass, the light blinked out, leaving only darkness and the echo of a voice I'll never forget. "See you tomorrow, Mark. 11:42. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't what your neighbors do. It's realizing they were watching you long before you ever noticed them. Maybe it's the sound of footsteps when you're home alone, the light that flickers in the house across the street, the feeling that someone knows your routine a little too well. We move through our lives thinking the walls between us are solid. But tonight, you've heard what happens when they aren't. If you made it this far, tell me in the comments, which story stayed with you the most? And if you've ever had a strange neighbor of your own, maybe it's time to check the window, just once more. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the quietest streets hide the darkest secrets.